Good afternoon and good evening. Hey, folks, it's Friday, October the 6th. It's the news show. We're taking the top five news stories of the week. That's what we'll be talking about. My name is Art at BR Peeps. I am here to Let's Be Reasonable. The name of the show is Let's Be Reasonable. Let's talk generally about politics. There's sometimes we will open the discussion to other items, but we're interested in following the 2024 general election, the primary, the general. What's going to get us to the decision that we make in November of 2024. Let's all stay tuned to that. But today, of course, it's Friday. So the Friday show is about the top five. Let's go ahead and jump right into the top five as we see it. So, first story right out the gate. The number five story as we count them down, right? The number five story, let me pull it up. Okay. And here we go. The number five story is the jobs report. As you noticed, the jobs report was released this morning, right? 8:30. They do this once a month. The first Friday of every month. And of course, this is the job number as reported. We created 336,000 jobs during the month of September. The unemployment rate went sideways and stayed at 3.8%. Why are we talking about this number? We're talking about this number because as it states or as it stands, everyone was concerned about the June number. The June number came in at 100,000 jobs created. If you know anything about the economy, in particular, the U.S. economy and how we look at these numbers, you will note that the economy should be creating somewhere around 270,000 jobs a month. Our goal is to kind of create about 2 million jobs every year. If we do that, we'll stay right within 2.5% to 3% GDP annually. There's some caveats to that based on inflation, based on consumer confidence, based on there's a few caveats. But if all things being equal and jobs being the driver, then numbers should look pretty good. So this number, if you're looking at Bidenomics and trying to put it up on the scorecard, so far so good. Everything looks to be tracking in the right direction, right? So since our June number, since that June number, we've kind of been on an upward tear. So that's a good sign that the economy is actually doing rather well. And of course, we're going into the fourth quarter. This is where retail sales numbers will show up, and they should be big. Americans have money to spend. I will say, also listed in the jobs report, they talked about wages kind of coming back in line. That probably means that the Fed will not be doing any tightening in November, but we'll just kind of have to stay tuned and see what happens. Of course, the jobs numbers for the month of October will come out when the Fed makes a decision in November. So that will probably be an indicator more so as to what they will end up doing. So there you have it, jobs. Without going too far into the weeds on this, but you have to look at Bidenomics from a wider lens, right? And you have to look at supply side economics, which was like what we pretty much did over the past 50 years. And then, of course, prior to that, past 40 years or so, you have to look at the Keynesian model of growing the economy from the bottom up, right? And then, of course, supply side economics is growing it from the bottom or top down. And then, of course, Biden's whole Bidenomic thing is growing the economy from the middle out. So we'll have to stay tuned to see how well this does. Of course, the other two periods, we got 40 plus year track record to kind of see what's happening and what's not happening. You're really not going to know about Bidenomics until sometimes, but that would also require Democrats kind of control the legislation and to control the White House. So, all that being said, that's the number five story, folks. Number five story of the day is that we're creating jobs here in the United States. Wages are in line. Things look pretty decent. So, we can't be complaining too much about that. But guess what? Biden will probably not get credit for the economy. That's just how it's running. So, that leads us to the number four story. The number four story in the shoot is Ukraine. When you look at Ukraine, the storyline goes like this, where we had a budget issue last week, last Saturday. They finally agreed on a CR, continuing resolution, but tucked in that continued resolution, there was no money or is no money for Ukraine. And if you are the Ukrainian prime minister, uh, Volodymyr Zelensky, you see that in the backdrop of coming to the United States, talking in front of the UN, getting rousing support from the UN, not being able to talk before a joint House and Senate or joint Congress, right? Because Kevin McCarthy said they were too busy, which he's right. They're too busy. And they probably could have squeezed in sometimes, but they are busy. Budget issues, that's priority. Because why? That's what they're told to do and assigned to do. So don't interfere with their actual job. That's what I'm saying. So he didn't meet with the Congress, but he did meet with the president, and then end up going to Canada before he went home. So now I said the backdrop. So that's the backdrop of not being the money, not having money in this CR is against the backdrop of all those different things that took place. So we hope that there will be a deal. And I don't want to go into the weeds so much as to why money to Ukraine is important. Here in America, we're dealing with some isolationism, the American first, and all that different adage. I get it. However, it must be measured in the wider lens of the equation, and I think that's what some of these people are kind of missing. However, I believe that Ukraine needs the aid that they're looking for. They need the weapon systems that they're looking for, and they need our support. They need they need all of those different things in order to stop the invading Russian party or the Russian government. So when you think of it, I'm not going to say that this is a battle that they end up winning, but they want to be able to repel the Russians from advancing any further. There's a history here, people. So there's a 300-year history of Russia being attacked from the West. The Russian Empire, that umbrella, if you think about all the pact nations, that made up the Russian Empire some 100, 150, 200 years ago. So that's what the goal has always been, to reestablish that empire, and it's kind of hard to do when you're being attacked in your western flank. So they want Ukraine, they want Poland, they want all of those different regions that kind of border Russia, so they can again have that sphere of influence in the region. So all that being said, Ukraine is just having a hard time. Even the spring offensive, the summer offensive, they're losing a lot of people or a lot of manpower. And of course, when the Russians can throw, looks like infinite. I mean, I think the number is like 7-1, 6-7-1. So for every Ukrainian, there's like 7 more Russians. So I mean that number is a big number. So hard to kind of be able to deal with. But for them to be able to function effectively, they're going to need some U.S. hardware, and they're going to need the support of not only NATO but the U.S. our people here in order to support them in. I mean, how would you feel? I mean, how would you feel if Canada was encroaching on our sovereignty? And that's kind of weird to even think about, right? But that's what's happening there. They're taking this sovereign state, and Russia is doing whatever they can in order to destroy it. So I am for the Ukrainians because I do think that 70-year policy of the Cold War policy that we had in place probably still resonates. There's things there that we need to continue to do in this day and age in order to protect U.S. interests, but also to protect our Western European allies. And Ukraine, even though they're not a NATO nation, they are one of them. So that being said, forgive the dog in the background. It's just obviously somebody's walking up the street. So anyway, let's continue. So that's Russia, right? Or Russia and Ukraine. So we talked about the unemployment and employment issue in the United States. We talked about Ukraine. Now on to the third story of the day. And that, of course, yes, for all intents and purposes, this lands us right here with what's going on in the speakers of the House, what's going on in the speaker's race. And as you note, there are 2 people vying for the position. So that's Steve Scalise, this guy back here, and then Jim Jordan. I favor Steve Scalise in this contest for speaker. However, I have a sneaky suspicion it will be Jim Jordan because Jim Jordan lines up better with the Republican brand of brinksmanship and close calls more than Steve Scalise. I think Scalise is probably a guy that's probably more interested in working across party lines and getting things done. Jim Jordan, he's a bomb thrower as well, and they're interested in brinksmanship. They're interested in doing whatever they can do in order to quasi say cut spending. Right now, I will say that's their job. What is the job of the House of Representatives? Well, it's budgetary. So they're doing their job. They want to cut spending. It makes sense. A lot of these things should be handled in the back room. In other words, you should be cutting deals in order to make these decisions and working with the other side. However, Jordan probably is not going to do that. And again, will be pushed to some form of brinksmanship every time. And this always comes down to the wire. And at the end of this 45-day period, there probably will be another CR in order to get us into the first quarter of next year before we see a big omnibus bill that kind of sets the table for funding for the remainder of 2024. So that's generally how it works. I think Steve Scalise is probably the right guy. However, I think Jim Jordan will be the guy that ends up taking it. And remember, Jim Jordan comes with his own brand of baggage too, right? Remember, he has the Ohio State scandal kind of always nipping at his heels, given the fact that there was a doctor that sexually molested several players and students and the rest. So there's that. so when you think of it, and compare that to Steve Scalise. Steve Scalise was a guy that got shot, remember, a few years ago, and made it back to the House of Representatives, maintaining his spot as the Republican whip, right? So those are your two people running. Again, I think it probably will be Jim Jordan, not Steve Scalise. However, I do wonder how many rounds it will take for us to get to 218. And do I think that will happen over the next week? I don't think so, but we shall stay tuned and see. All right. So that is our third story, right? That's the third story. So we talked about the employment picture. We talked about Ukraine. Now we got which was the hot story going into the weekend, right? We talked about the Speaker of the House race and Kevin McCarthy. Actually, we didn't even mention his name during this. We didn't even mention his name. That's great. So Kevin McCarthy, and actually, speaking of Kevin McCarthy, there's a story that said he's thinking about retiring after this session. So there's that. And he's probably a little mad, right? He's probably a little mad. So thinking about retiring is probably on brand for Kevin McCarthy, right? Anyway, so we got three stories in. We got two left. Of course, in the number two spot, we have, of course, Donald Trump. Donald Trump is in a civil case over in the great state of New York. In New York, he's having a doozy of a time. Remember last week, the judge was reviewing the case, determining whether or not he had committed fraud, and it was a bench trial. And it looks like the Trump people asked for a bench trial instead of a jury trial, probably from the standpoint of they thought that a jury would not give him a fair shake, right? So let's have a bench trial. So they had a bench trial. I brought these documents for the judge to review before they had opening arguments and the rest. And the judge basically said, oh, hell no. There's no need to even hear the arguments because this is fraud. I mean, this is a documents case. That's what everyone says. This is a documents case. You signed your name on the document. Therefore, they found out the information is not true. Proving intent becomes easy because it's a pattern. And this pattern goes back over a period of several years because they were looking at 2011 going forward. So when you see that, it led us to the ill-gotten gains portion of the case, which started on Monday this week. And of course, we're into day 5, and we've got MSNBC on tap. So let's see what they have to say, and we'll talk about a little bit of this on the other side. So give me a second here to make sure I got my speakers all set. Okay, here we go.
Breaking news, everybody. Donald Trump's civil fraud trial just wrapped up in New York City with the former president still trying to stop it in its tracks. Trump's legal team filing this request for 2 stays during day 5 of the trial. One, to stop a judge's order that could gut his company, and the other, to pause the trial. Attorney General Letitia James responding this morning saying the court should not upend an ongoing trial. For now, though, that trial is going to remain ongoing and pick back up Tuesday when former Trump CFO Allen Weisselberg is expected to testify. Today, ex-Trump organization controller Jeff McConney was back on the stand being grilled over valuations of Trump's properties. Joining us now to talk more about this, MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin, who has been inside that courtroom for us, along with Barbara McQuade, former U.S. attorney, University of Michigan law professor, and an MSNBC legal analyst. Lisa, pick up for us what you saw inside that courtroom, some of the developments, the major developments today.
Well, Yasmin, the hubbub outside the courthouse has largely toned down without former President Trump here, but inside it ratcheted up to a rather fiery level at the end of the direct examination of Jeff McConney. That's because Andrew Amer of the Attorney General's office was taking him through some of the most egregious examples of exaggerated valuations, whether it came to telling people in his statements of financial condition that he wasn't incorporating, for example, the value of the Trump brand, but actually assigning 30% or 50% brand premiums to his golf courses, or treating Mar-a-Lago as if it could be sold as an individual residence when there is in fact a deed on it saying it can only be used as a club. He got McConney to admit that the values of those properties were set in all sorts of inappropriate and deceptive ways. But really the fireworks were left for the end when
Not good.
McConney was forced to admit that not only did he engage in much of the conduct that the Attorney General's office has alleged here, but he also assisted former Trump CFO Allen Weisselberg, who, as you noted, is expected on the stand Tuesday morning, in the tax fraud for which he was convicted after pleading guilty to 15 felony counts last year. McConney said that he not only assisted Weisselberg in the fraud, that he knew it was illegal, and most importantly, that he did it because Weisselberg was his boss and he feared for his job. Yasmin, it was quite an explosive day to end the trial day. We know McConney won't be cross-examined by the Trump side, and Tuesday morning we'll begin with Allen Weisselberg, as you noted.
Okay, so what she said? She said that McConney admitted that they inflated the values of properties, and he admitted to working with Weisselberg in order to fix the books for the tax purposes. So, all right. So, is there any reason why you think that the judge shouldn't have agreed that this was fraud? It was kind of crystal clear that this was fraud, and of course now this week we're into the ill-gotten gains portion. Since you committed fraud and made money, the fraudulent act, right, is still a crime. Now we're having to deal with the fallout of the ill-gotten gains. So we'll see how this case turns out, but they are 5 days in. Trump is filing motions, right? He's filing motions to have the case overturned. He's filing motions to have the case, the receivership portion of the case slowed down. So we'll see exactly what happens. And, it's at the end of the day, it's entertainment. So, and of course, Trump's filing motions all over the place because he's got a couple Jan 6 motions out there asking for dismissal because he had executive privilege, which we probably know is not going to go too far. And there's just, he's all over the place. Again, his goal is to file these motions, hopefully win the election in November and kill all of these cases. Can't kill the civil case. So the case that probably matters the most, and you can hear from other networks their argument that no one was harmed. And I have to tell you, again, that you're giving him all kinds of benefit of the doubt if you're going to say that no one was harmed. I think if you or I were to commit fraud on any paperwork, any paperwork, there is a chance that you could be sued, right? So I could be sued by the lender. I could be sued by, the people who are the vested parties, I think, would be the lender and the state, right? So interesting case. Anyway, so we'll see how it all washes out. So that's the actually 2 case, right? That's number 2 news story of the week. The number 1 news story of the week, people. We're going back to politics. We're going back to where it matters for us. And of course, we will hear from Chris Cuomo and talk about Nikki Haley. So Take it away, Chris.
He is the presumptive candidate. Why? He's killing it in the polls, but you got to look at the trends. Polls are just snapshots of a moment in time. And Nikki Haley did well in those two debates. Nikki Haley is someone who can affect the reasonable Republican mind. She's knocked DeSantis out of the way, at least for now, which makes her the main rival, but she's not getting a lot of love. One reason is she doesn't do a lot of TV. But let's debate. For Team Trump, former Trump surrogate, Scotty Nell Hughes. Supporting Trump, open to whoever will beat Biden. She thinks that's Trump, so that's who she is. For Team Haley, contributing writer at Bustle, Lindsey Granger. First, Scotty, do you fear the Nikki Haley?
I don't fear the Nikki Haley. In fact, I think it's great that her polls have actually surged. It shows right now actually the divide that's happening in the Republican Party is actually growing even more than before, because Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump were the same on a lot of issues. In fact, those at the top were. Now what you're seeing is even more of a divide, which actually helps conservative voters, because you cannot look at how Donald Trump feels on international policy and Nikki Haley. They're complete polar opposites. Despite Nikki Haley being the UN ambassador for Donald Trump, they actually don't agree on much on international ranks. So this is actually good for Republican voters, because it actually shows the separation and shows where the actual strength in the Republican Party voter actually lies.
But doesn't, Ms. Granger, doesn't Nikki Haley satisfy all of the appetites? She has most of the policy positions. Internationally, she disagrees with Trump, but on a lot of the points that she disagrees with him, she's much more in line with traditional conservative orthodoxy. And doesn't she necessarily have a broader reach than he does? Why aren't Republicans more excited about her?
Well, I think it takes time. I think when we look at polling and what the numbers said, even if you look at Hillary Clinton versus Trump, all the polls said that Hillary would win the election and she didn't. So we have to slowly watch these and see what the outcome will be. But I'm happy that Nikki is finally getting her just due and rising in the polls, because 3/4 of Americans don't want to see a rematch between Biden and Trump. And that's just the hard fact. I mean, Nikki Haley, like you said, has the policy experience. She has the diversity. She's a formidable candidate. She's been a Trump cabinet member. So if you are somebody who's blindly following President Trump, even after he's currently being indicted and possibly might be a criminal by the time that he gets on or fully gets to the election, you still have somebody who worked with him and who left peaceably from his from his side. And so there was no aggravated grievances there like there are with some other people that left his team. She crosses over to suburban women. So I think that's a big deal, because in the general election against President Biden, I think that you would actually have, like you said, an actual race. And so bringing somebody who's sensible to the table, especially at this time where Congress is in array and we can't get things, it seems like once again, we can't get things level-headed. Nikki Haley has always presented herself as the adult in the room. And if you took a look at the last two debates, you know that she outspoke everyone on those debate stages 2 times in a row. And I think that speaks for itself.
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, this is the #1 story. And here's the reason why it's the #1 story. I think they showed Nikki Haley early in New Hampshire. I think, yeah, they put it up right there. I'll put it up here. So when you look at New Hampshire, she's in second place in New Hampshire. She's still light years away from Donald Trump, but she's in second place, right? So the third debate is coming up in November. I told you the last debate, I thought 2 people stood out. I thought Chris Christie probably won the debate, but Nikki Haley definitely got in a lot of good shots. I mean, she got shots in on Ramaswamy and she got shots in on DeSantis, right? Kind of left them on the back foot, so to speak, right? So when you saw Nikki Haley, I told everybody that I saw Chris Christie and Nikki Haley as the 2 heavies during that debate. Now, in saying that, I'm going to tell you right now, I have always been a fan, more so of Nikki Haley than Chris Christie. The reason why I was a fan of Nikki Haley was that she was in a southern state, and I think it was 2013, 2014. She told them to take that flag down. She wasn't about the cross bars, and she's like, get that flag out of here. So she got rid of the flag, and I was like, okay, let me start paying attention to Nikki Haley and what's happening in South Carolina. Nikki Haley is a formidable candidate She's not a fly-by-nighter. I really think she's a formidable candidate. Remember, she was also the ambassador to the UN under Trump. This girl checks off all the boxes when you're thinking about the conservative motif. So when you think about less government, lowering taxes, family values, she has it in spade, as opposed to the front runner, right? This guy hasn't seen a debt that he's not willing to take, right? He is on record in many, well, he doesn't support family values, whatever that may be, right? So that's not his bag. So when you look at it, she checks off all the boxes. She's doing well. She needs to have a really good third debate. And she needs to remember that in that third debate, all guns are going to be pointed at her, right? So she should be prepared to take on whatever these guys are going to throw their way. And of course, what they're going to go to her record. She has a record in South Carolina, so she needs to be making sure that she can dot her I's and cross her T's and make these other guys look bad, because that's what they're going to try to hit her on in November the 8th, when that debate takes place. If she has a good debate, it sets up well for Iowa. She needs to finish 1, 2, or 3 in Iowa. If she gets 1, 2, or 3, I'm going to say she probably gets 2 or 3. If she gets in 1 or 2 or 3, she sets up well for New Hampshire to either get 1 or 2. If she gets 1 in New Hampshire, South Carolina is next, right? So South Carolina is her country, right? So she should end up winning South Carolina. At that point, coming out of Iowa, if Trump is showing weakness going into New Hampshire, that weakness shows up. If that weakness materializes further in New Hampshire, it sets up well for her to win South Carolina. If she wins South Carolina Super Tuesday, I think it sets up well for her to be a dominant candidate after Super Tuesday. And trust me, the name calling, bird brain, Nikki Haley, and the rest of it, that will be flowing from Trump. Trust me, there'll be a whole, but Trump will have his own piece that he's looking at. And you know what? Those attacks on men probably work better, man on man. Those attacks like that, when you're attacking a woman, doesn't look well. So a group of people in this country that will support Nikki Haley in that particular barrage of contest will be women, right? So women will want Nikki Haley. Like I said, man, the deck is really in her favor. I'm kind of, like I said, been on this train for Nikki Haley for quite some time. And again, I'll tell you, I'm an independent. I'm not a Democrat. I'm an independent. So, hey, there's a third that's Democrat, that's ride or die Democrat. There's a third that is ride or die Republican, no matter what, right? And then there's a third of independents. We kind of tend to look around, right? We kind of tend to look around. And I think independents will look favorably on Nikki Haley. I think that women will look favorably on Nikki Haley. And if that's the case, the competition is between Nikki Haley and Joe Biden, right? If that were to materialize, I still give the edge to Nikki Haley. And the reason why I give it to Nikki Haley is because of what you see currently. Hey, Biden's doing a great job, especially in the economy, but he's getting no credit whatsoever with regard to the economy. So that issue sets up well for Republicans in most cases. So that would set up well for her, Nikki Haley. I don't know what she said about abortion rights and the rest of it, but I imagine she wants some type of ban after 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever the number is. Would she be in favor of a national ban or something? She may be in favor for that, right? But I don't know. But there will be things that she will have to deal with. That's my point. But she stacks up well, and I think she ends up winning in November, if that be the case. So all of these things being said, Nikki Haley, in my opinion, Chris Christie, good candidate. Right? Like I said before, if you were looking at Chris Christie or Ron DeSantis, Ron DeSantis is Chris Christie light. Chris Christie, man, he was like in the throats of unions and everybody up in New Jersey, right? Ron DeSantis is talking about stuff that doesn't even, feel woke. What are you talking about? And even the way you use it, you don't even use it right. And the funny thing about not using it right, I've seen people on YouTube and other places try to explain to Republicans what woke actually means, and they don't care what you're saying. They don't care. They just want to believe whatever it is. So when people take the information and they still don't change their mind, it's baked in. So I'm going to tell you. So between the two, Chris Christie and Ron DeSantis, I'd zero out Ron DeSantis and give the thumbs up to Chris Christie, but neither one of them have the horsepower, I think, that Nikki Haley has. So, hey, folks, that's the news show for the week. There is one other show. Doesn't make the 5, right? Doesn't make the list of 5, but there's one other thing that I want to talk about before I get out of here, and I'm going to make this really brief because those 5 news stories are the best stories of the week according to, our metrics, right? So those are the 5 best stories, but there's one more. And the one last story I want to talk about before we go is this guy. This guy right here. There he is, Commander. Commander has left the White House. All right. And I don't care what you think. I mean, this dog is bit like, I think it's 10 Secret Service agents now. So, and he's a young pup, but you can't have your dog biting Secret Service agents. So Commander is not going back to Delaware. They didn't actually say where he was going, but he's probably going to get some more training. And you have to remember, Commander is a rescue dog. And if you know the difference between like your rescue dogs versus, maybe one that you bred and all the rest of it, rescue dogs have had some trauma in their life. And this poor guy, I don't know what the trauma is. I have 2 rescue dogs myself, right? And I can tell you, one of them, she cowers when she gets around a lot of people. I don't know what that's about, but there's something unnerving for her in that space. And, I try to just help her out because I wanted to know that she's not alone. And then we have another dog. I'm not even going to go into the details of what happened to this guy. This guy was just thoroughly abused. Just the first week he got to our home, he just would not even come in. You couldn't even get him on a leash. He was so scared, and he's really come a long way over the past year. But you know what? These dogs experience trauma. And for people to be able to take the time and want to spend time with them by adopting them and making them part of their family, man, bravo to the Bidens, right? I say bravo to the Bidens because Commander, look at that guy's face. That's a good dog. I don't know what the trauma is, but I hope he gets some help. And I hope to see him back in 2024 at the White House, hopefully not biting people. But hey, you know what, folks? That's our show for the evening. Told you everything you need to know about this week. Look forward to next week. It's going to be round 2 or week 2 of the Trump trial. Civil trial. We'll see what happens in the House, and we'll see what other news kind of comes out. But hey, like this video, subscribe to our channel for more content, more information as we release it. We look forward to being out here doing this up until 2024, late November, so we can get all the election information that we need in order to make informed decisions. Why? Because we're reasonable people. We're all reasonable. I don't care if you're left or right, center, whatever it is. Let's make reasonable assumptions and assertions based on the information that we have in front of us. So all that being said, folks, have a great evening. See you next time.